there's no place on earth I wouldn't want to be than right here, in this minute of trying to bring success to one of the biggest football clubs in the world. The basic underlying principles that I want my team to play football that scares the life out of every opposition, mate. That's kind of the end game.
And welcome to the Varside Spurs podcast once again, and on another upbeat after another win in which we find ourselves only 4 points off the top. Joined today once again is Ritch Grove. How are you doing,
Hello.
buddy?
Hello, my friend. I'm all right. I'm obviously very chipper.
Yes, good. As we should be, right? That
Yeah.
yesterday's game, we'll go into it in a bit more detail. Maybe it wasn't a vintage performance, but all things considered, that was a tough game, and we came away with 3 points.
Yeah. I mean, I know, in our optimistic sort of chat at the end of the last pod that we were predicting that we would put 3 or 4 past them. And in fact, we probably should have put 3 or 4 past them with the chances we had, let alone, the teams on paper. But, I think I said, and I think you alluded to it as well, that it was never going to be an easy game and that they were going to try and kick us off the field, which is exactly what they did. And we weathered it well, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, they were a vociferous bunch, weren't they? I mean, actually, it's quite a hostile crowd, I thought. I thought they played a big part in the way that Forest tried. I mean, you've got to give them that. I mean, considering the sort of parlous position they find themselves in, and the fact that their manager, it looks like he's on the cusp of possibly getting a sack. They're fully behind him, fully behind their team. I mean, the players are shithouses. We'll get into that as well. But that it was a lively atmosphere for us to cope with.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it always is at the City Ground. It is one of those old-fashioned grounds where everybody's on top of you a bit. They get a sizable crowd in there as well. I mean, even Ange said afterwards, didn't he? I think I can't remember if it was it was the Sky interview or the Spurs one that he said. Standing on the touchline there, it felt like they'd conceded a goal every time Forest won a corner or a throw in. The
Yeah,
crowd were that
yeah,
on.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, not an easy place to go at the best of times, and you've got to give them their credit. They are behind Steve Cooper. I think the crowd have kept him in a job, haven't they? Because if they were ambivalent about it, he'd have gone weeks ago, I think.
Absolutely, mate. So, I'll give you my thoughts afterwards, but I just wanted to get your kind of like overarching thoughts on the first half. How did you feel it sort of ebbed and flowed, and how did you feel about that first half that we played?
Um, I mean, it was one of them, that it's kind of like, the blueprint has reversed from what it was in previous years, hasn't it? That we come out the blocks a lot stronger than we ever used to now. We always used to start quite slowly, didn't we? And I mean, obviously, Sonny had that chance very early and we should have been 1-0 up. And I think probably it was a good thing, looking at the overall arc of the game, it was probably a good thing we didn't score that goal. It might have encouraged them to rally earlier, whereas as it was, I think they grew into the game, but it took them 25 minutes to do so, didn't it?
Yeah. That's
Um,
kind
yeah,
of
I
my
think,
thoughts really as well. I mean, it's like I get the sense that for that first 20, 25 minutes, we were utterly dominant. You
mm,
looked at it and thought, wow, I mean, this could be, this could be a very healthy scoreline here. But they gradually found a foothold in the game, and I think that's when we sort of started to become a bit sloppy and a bit slow. And because some of those passes, which maybe, I don't know if they were under hit or just we were just not quite as sharp as we needed to be, we then started to get dragged into battles. And then once they started kicking us, which again we've talked about as a theme, one of the ways to disrupt this team is just
mm,
basically to boot us to shit. Like, once more, we didn't really get any protection from the referee. And that, I think, did have the desired impact for them. It disrupted the way that we played. I think it frustrated some of our players because some of those tackles were going unpunished. And they got a foothold in the game. And so, yeah, it was a frustrating first half, I felt, because we looked so dominant to begin with.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, and I think, with a nod towards that, how the referee handled the game, I think he did particularly badly in that respect. That
Mm,
I can see he wanted the game to go, and he wanted to let a lot of, obviously that is a policy this year that they let a lot of niggling fouls go to allow the game to flow a bit more. And that I'm generally in favour of that. I think it's a
mhm,
very good
mhm,
thing. I think players have got to learn to be stronger and more physical in the game, and I think this is something that this is one of those things where you say it's a teething problem of having that new policy kind of asserted arbitrarily at the start of a season, and we look at it and call it inconsistency, and it is inconsistency, but I think it in general it's a good thing, even if it's not implemented particularly well. Last night was an example of it being implemented badly, and I think all of our bookings that go on to affect our future fixtures have come as a result of frustration that would not have been in our players' sort of mentality had he
mm,
handled
mm.
the game properly. That hadn't have been. Yates was kicking shit out of our
Oh,
players from the minute go.
yeah.
Uh, and of course, every one of the retaliatory cards that got picked up, he was involved in it, either in
Mm,
the first tackle or the turnover or the melee afterwards.
mm,
Well,
mm.
the kind of grouping around the referee and that afterwards. So I think had the referee kind of handled it a bit better, and I think handling it better was as simple as Yates should have been in the book before half time.
He had 8 fouls and not one card. How did that guy not get a single card? That is just
Yeah.
utterly ridiculous.
And I mean, I think if he's in the book before half time, some of the heavy challenges that he put in that our players then retaliated badly to
Mm,
wouldn't have happened because he'd have been managed better. So
yeah, yeah.
whilst I'm generally in favour of them letting the game go, I mean, I've said it several times. I think our home game against Fulham was a particularly good example of that.
Mm, mm.
Um, I think last night was a particularly egregious example of it not being handled well at all.
Yeah, no, well said. I agree, and I think letting it go is different to them making a rod for your own back as a referee, which I think he did. And had to try. He was losing grip of the game because it was getting dirtier and nastier. And to be honest, I never thought that maybe naively, I haven't really seen too many Forest games, but I didn't think they were a dirty team. But yesterday, by God, they whether this is how they usually play or whether this is one of these kind of like the tactics going around the Premier League. If you're a lower league side, you aren't going to compete football wise in terms of technical skill with our lot, so boot the shit out of them and see where that leads. Johnson, case in point, that absolutely clattered, ended up going off with what looked like concussion. Turns out it wasn't, but there's a nasty gash in his head,
Mm,
covered in blood.
yeah.
Um, you know, where protection for our players was zero. Um, but yeah, I mean, cherry on the cake, I suppose, in that half was Kulu's sublime cross for Richie's goal. Richie
Yeah.
took it well, but that was made by Kulusevski. That was absolutely ridiculous cross.
I mean, it was inch perfect again, wasn't it? It was as
Yeah.
good as Porro's for Richarlison's goal the
Hmm.
other day. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah,
I mean, just wonderful, wonderful play.
yeah.
Especially considering that he kind of, I think if I remember rightly, there were three players on him when he made that ball. He cut in and made that ball, so it's not even as if he was in acres of space to pick it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then it felt like as that momentum started to shift, as we said, after about sort of 20, 25 minutes, it felt like a Forest goal was coming. Alanga puts one in clearly offside. I mean, what the hell did they need VAR for on that? I mean, it looked like people were miles offside in the like, just from the eye test.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's bonkers, isn't it? It's one that the linesman should have called, let alone the referee,
Yeah.
let
Yeah. And
alone
then
VAR.
that
But yeah.
I couldn't work it out. So like in that first half, we end up with 4 minutes added time. Well, we had Johnson down with a head wound, plus that
Mm,
VAR. That was only
mm,
4 minutes. Yet in the
yeah.
second half, we had 8 minutes added.
Yeah.
What's that all about then? Because none of that kind of drama. We had, there was one VAR incident, but 8 minutes added. Where did that
I
come
guess
from?
I guess it's the 30 seconds for a substitution, isn't it? That's where that comes from. Is that's
Yeah.
arbitrary now, isn't it? Each time you make a sub, they add 30 seconds, and I suppose both teams, bought four players on,
Mm,
all doubles. So, yeah, I don't know. It's again, it's nonsensical, isn't it? Unless
mm.
they are consciously adding that extra time onto the end of a match rather than at half time, because then it eats into punditry rather than advertising revenue. I don't know. Maybe that's just
Who knows? Yeah.
incident. Who knows? Who knows?
But yeah, anyway, so Alanga's goal was rightly ruled
Yeah.
offside. And at that point you kind of felt that we needed half time for Ange to sort of get into the players a bit. And so getting into the second half then, I think we just felt like we needed another one to settle us down here. And because it felt like we were on the ropes a bit. We were getting, possession turned over but it came as a bit stroke of luck for us. As a terrible kick out by their keeper Turner. We took the
Mm.
possession. Ball is not wide to Kulusevski, who then just like
He-
he's a battering ram, and he just
Yeah.
like smashed his way through, smashed the
Yeah.
shot, and
Yeah.
Turner couldn't hold it.
Well, I mean, I'm surprised Turner didn't end up in the back of the goal as well. I
Yeah,
mean, he hit it that hard, didn't he? It did.
yeah.
All of them, you could feel it. And a wonderful goal, to cap that performance. He is a machine, isn't he, at the moment?
Mm, mm. Oh yeah. I mean I mean his what impresses me most about him is his maturity. I think he's still only 23, something like that,
Mm,
isn't he? Something, the way he speaks about the game and about you know the team itself in the interviews, he comes across brilliantly, so mature, understands what we've yet to do. Talking about where he's at the moment with his life, he's talking about he couldn't be happier. He loves the
mm.
way Andrew's playing, really feels this is building to something. And this player, I mean, you got to be thinking he's £100 million player the way he's playing at the moment.
I'm going to start calling you Gary Neville if you keep that up.
Yeah,
Uh, I know,
yeah,
I noticed he made that exact point after the game finished last night, and I thought, well, you can tell a player's doing well when Neville starts trying to sell him, can't you?
yeah, yeah. Well, he's
Um,
also trying to sell Ange to Man City as well, isn't he?
yeah, yeah, I think
Yeah.
he is. Yeah, I mean, fucking,
Spurs better just enjoy him at the moment because in a couple of years' time, he may well
yeah,
find himself at Man City. Fuck off.
yeah.
You were telling us he was naive about 2 weeks ago.
Exactly that, yeah, yeah. But no, Kulusevski, what a wonderful game. I mean, I think what summed up the match that we were playing was his reaction to that goal.
Yeah, yeah,
You could tell that he was like, "Fucking have that, you bastards!" And I think
yeah,
that was
yeah,
a response to them kicking seven bells out of
yeah,
everybody
yeah.
for the 60 odd minutes before it. I mean, that was a very much a fuck you celebration, wasn't it?
Yeah, I like this one because he did this before. This one where he looks like he's snapping planks over his legs.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
that's
like,
it.
oosh. It's like, no, he's breaking someone's back or something.
Yeah,
And then, but they had obviously planned this goal celebration, hadn't they? Because Dozy Ritchie had booted the ball in the crowd, and I think he gave him a look, and then Ritchie then retrieves the ball, brings it back, he sticks it under his jumper, and then
yeah,
does the heart sign. So, congratulations. As he confirmed afterwards, he's going to be a dad. What a
yeah.
nice way to announce it.
Well, if you're going to have to go to Nottingham at any point, getting a goal and a man of the match performance has got to be a reward for that, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Uh,
uh,
then we, on this roller coaster ride, then we end up with Basuma, who gets a yellow card for a tackle, but then it goes to VAR, and he ends up seeing red. What do you make of that? Do you think that's a red?
it has to be because he made contact with the player's knee with his studs. Like,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's that.
Feels
People,
orange to me. I know that's a bit of a cliche nowadays using that
yeah, I
term, but
don't think so. I think if the roles were reversed and it was Yates against Basuma, you'd have been saying he should have been sent off.
oh yeah, but I'd be saying that regardless,
Yeah.
even if he'd brushed him like lightly, I'd still be saying that.
Yeah, I think it's a red. I think it has to be a red because his studs were showing and he made contact with the player's knee, and
Yeah,
it's as simple as that. It's
yeah,
been a rule
yeah.
for a couple of years now. It's not a new thing. I think it was careless. I don't think there was any intent in it, but I don't think that matters. I think he has to go for it because if you let
Mm,
that go, what happens, like you were saying a minute ago about the referee losing control of the game. What happens if Basuma stays on the pitch?
mm,
At that point, you're going to get retaliation.
mm.
Um, you're going to get players thinking they can go in with their studs up. So yeah, I think it was against Yates, wasn't it? He wasn't
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
he wasn't actually hurt in that incident, but if that foul goes unpunished and the game starts to get away from the referee as a result of that, whether it's intentional or not, I think is beside the point.
Mm, mm,
Is that at some point in 10 minutes' time, somebody else goes in with studs up because suddenly it's open season on going in
mm,
heavy.
mm.
Somebody else can get hurt.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think it
No,
has to be, and I think it's fucking stupid on Bisuma's fault. I think
yeah. It's his
and he
second
hasn't
now, isn't it?
he hasn't had the best game. Like Sarah's had a much better game than him, I think. He was a little bit anonymous and he a bit slow in possession and he got robbed of the ball a few times. So I don't think he was having a particularly good performance, really. But yeah, like you say, I mean, at least it's not his second offence for that kind of thing. I mean, he was sent
Mm.
off for diving the first time,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
at least you can say he might be stupid, but at least he's not reckless habitually like Romero is.
Mm, mm.
And let's say weren't Jamie Carragher, if you were listening to it on Sky, weren't Jamie Carragher and whoever the other commentator was gleefully trying to get thinking Romero should have gone for the one that he got booked
Oh,
for,
yeah, yeah.
so we can say that, but yeah, I think this is what I was saying earlier. Those kind of loose retaliatory tackles are going in because the referee's not managing that game.
Mm,
Because
mm.
our players are getting frustrated, and although I'm not wishing to absolve them of responsibility, I think the responsibility has to be shared. You know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can, like I said when we were chatting about it yesterday, I can see why he had to go. So especially once they go to the VAR screen, it's gonna end up that way. It always looks worse in slow motion. And to give them their due, they did play at normal speed as well. But I think it wasn't malicious. This is why I sort of okay, it 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 was a red. But it also I've seen ones where that's not been a red, um, simply because I think he misreads the bounce of the ball and he tries to sort of pull out. That's why he hits the side of his leg
Yeah,
rather
yeah,
than full on. There's nothing malicious in it. He's not trying to endanger that player. It was clumsy basically, but whether it's clumsy or not, he had to go. And that's his second now. We won't see him until probably February. You can
yeah,
see Andrew on the touchline shaking his head. I mean, afterwards, Andrew addressed the issue because they said, "Look, you've had a few players now sent off. Is this a problem?" And he said, "No." He says it's the way we play. He says
Mhm.
we talk about it all the time, and we're trying to just find the right balance at the moment between sort of having that, I suppose, that aggression to be able to turn out the ball over and then get on with our pressing and get on the front foot, and sort of balance it with with the discipline, I suppose, and how we play. And Basuma's been a wally, isn't he? Really there.
Yes, yeah. Although the thing that's just occurred to me when you were saying it, I mean, I'm not a massive fan of the constant evolution of the rules of football. I think it should still be the simple game that it was at the start of the Premier League.
Mm,
Let's say,
mm,
and let's not go into VAR and all that again because I think there's enough time wasted speaking about that fucking thing. But I think if we are talking about how the game might change in a more positive way, I think that challenge might be a good example of, like you've just said, an orange card or what have you. It might be, if there is talk every now and again, it comes up of whether or not there should be sin bin offences,
mm,
like
mm.
they have in rugby union. You go off for 10 minutes, or whatever it is, and then that might be a good example of that because it
Yeah,
does retain control of the game by removing the player from the pitch for a long enough period to punish the player, even if there wasn't any, um, sort of malicious intent in it. I mean, we saw it in the Rugby World Cup final.
Mm.
The South Africa captain was sin bin for a chunk of the game, for coming together ahead. And although they sort of discussed it and said it wasn't, a malicious sort of, he didn't set out to hurt the other guy. It is an infraction in terms of the rules, so he has to go. And yet he was able then, let's say that was a league game and not the final of a tournament, he wouldn't have been punished going forwards by missing the next game for the fact that he was careless rather than setting out to hurt somebody. Maybe
Yeah.
this is an example of that sort of challenge,
Yeah. Yeah.
because you are right. He obviously did misread it, and I mean the very fact that he stayed on his feet, he wasn't sliding in, so he wasn't
Mm.
completely out of control.
No. Yeah.
But anyway, like you say, he's
Yeah.
been an idiot, and of course we won't see him again for a long time. Benton Kerr will be back from his injury
Yeah.
before
Yeah.
he's available again.
He's gonna have to
You
fight for his place back in the team, isn't he?
he's gonna have to find a place in that starting 11,
Yeah.
which is no bad thing.
No, that's fair enough. We all another clumsy challenge. We end up with Udogie ends up with a yellow, and he now is also going to miss the Everton game. I
Yeah.
think that's more of a worry for us. But yeah, actually, I just want to ask you this: do you think we have a discipline problem, or I mean, are we treated more harshly, or do you think there is a bit of a discipline problem? And just sort of factor in the fact that quite a lot of our boys are young players as well, though.
I don't think we do have a discipline problem. No, I don't think so at all. I don't think we're treated particularly harshly with regard to other teams. I think, in big games, when we're playing the Manchester Cities and the Liverpools, they will often get the rub of the green when it comes to contentious decisions. Obviously, as we saw against Liverpool earlier in the year, they don't always go that way, but often that is the case. I don't think we have a discipline problem. I think the game is played very, very quickly, and I think the margins in between a sloppy challenge, a missed challenge, somebody that makes contact, I think the way that the game is managed is slightly different these days. In the challenge, it's kind of encouraged to be a bit more physical, and so
Mm,
referees don't pick up on every little niggly little thing like they had done, which means I think players as a rule are kind of emboldened to go in a little bit harder than maybe they have done the last couple of years. I think I don't think we're any worse than anybody else in the league. I mean, certainly we're not
no.
dirtier than anybody else in the league. Like you say, you look at how Forest played last night. You look at how Newcastle played the other week. Aston Villa did it against us as
Hmm.
well.
Hmm.
That's just a couple of examples recently. Teams will come out and kick you up into the air if they think they can get away with it.
Mm,
And I
hmm.
don't think we do that.
No.
So I don't think it is a discipline problem, or an approach or a
Mm.
policy problem. I don't know. I think it's just
It's just a learning curve, I think, isn't it,
we're
for a
watching
lot of.
them games, aren't we? I couldn't tell
Yeah.
you how many times Everton go down to 10 men because I don't watch them every week,
No. I mean, you
So,
wouldn't say Liverpool have had as many red cards as us, and you wouldn't say they're a dirty team either, would you? Like with a discipline problem.
well, I would, yeah, but then
Oh,
I
you'd say
fucking,
yeah, but
I
in a
fucking hate
different
it.
sense. We're talking
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
we're talking
I,
semantics here. No.
yeah. I mean, I'll accuse them fuckers of everything just because of
Yeah.
who they are. But yeah, no, exactly that. Everybody has players sent off. Everybody has discipline problems
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
place. I mean, let's talk about it. Everybody in the league is talking, with great flourishes of adulation about Aston
Mm,
Villa.
mm,
Now,
mm.
the dirtiest side I've seen this year.
Well, I suppose the way we play as well. We're always we feel like we're playing on the edge, and I think Romero's like that. He plays on the edge. He can be sublime, but also ridiculous. There sometimes there can be that issue, and it's just about getting the consistency with not going over that edge. And I think we'll get there. We're a young team, so I do agree with you. I don't think we are a dirty or a team of ill discipline. I think we're learning, and I think the boys are learning to play that system with the risk that we have to take, especially with that incessant pressing. There's going to be a few of these until we kind of get it right. But
Mm.
anyhow, I
But
think
I think
I just sorry, go on,
I
mate.
think
Go on.
I think the other thing as well is you have to play against the opposition that are in front of you.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and the one thing that we've noticed, of late is we've picked up a lot of cards against teams that are scrappy,
Mm.
that are playing scrappy against us. Even teams that are at the top of the league are doing. Aston Villa are shithousing their way into the Champions
Mm.
League place at the minute. They're not playing expansive football to get there. They're shithousing everybody, and they're
Yeah,
scrappy.
yeah,
And when you're playing them games, you can pick up a lot of cards.
yeah.
I mean, I think just going back very, very quickly before we move on to one thing that you just said, whether or not we're treated unfairly. I think there is an element occasionally where we pick up cards that possibly other teams wouldn't have. You think last night being the example, 8 serious challenges before Yates goes in the book. Ben
Yeah.
Davies runs his fingertips across somebody in the 80th minute.
Yeah.
He wasn't the last man, and he goes in the book for
What
it.
about Skip? It wasn't even,
Yeah,
it wasn't even, it didn't even touch the guy and he ended up getting a card.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So there is, I don't know. I mean, I know what, I'm loath to say it because you're just going to be accused of, having this victim mentality and it's conspiracy and all this kind of crap. But, things like that are just inconsistent, let's say then, and that's not, and we need to make that better because clearly that's not, it's not, a level playing field.
No, but I mean, I think this goes back to something that we were saying earlier as well. And I will say this, my caveat to this entire conversation is I'm not particularly complaining about this. I'm
Mm,
perfectly happy for this just to be an element of football,
mm,
right? Perhaps I'm a little bit more circumspect than some people about this, and perhaps I'd be accused of not caring as much, and
mm,
frankly, you
mm,
can accuse me of whatever you want. I don't really care. I'm perfectly comfortable with my engagement, Like, I think this is the thing is that it's all the inconsistency has been there for the 100 and something years that we have had league football.
mm,
And
mm,
it's going to be there forever because even with the advent of VAR and things, with the exception of goal line technology, which is the one time that you can say hard and fast, okay, we have a system that says automatically whether or not a ball has crossed the line. That everything else is a subjective decision, even with the advent and the introduction of new technologies. It is always going to be a proxy for a subjective decision because
mm,
there are too many movables. The game's moving too quickly. We've spoken about this before. It's not the same as rugby. It's not the same as tennis. It's not the same as cricket or any of the other examples where they employ this stuff. And I think the game would be better if everybody just said, "Do you know what? Let's just go back to listening to managers moaning about referees after a game." Because managers are still moaning, fans are still moaning, the solutions are not
mm.
solving anything. The subjectivity is still there and it's always going to be there. And I think we would be better off to just say, it is what it is. Do you
Yeah,
know what? It doesn't
yeah,
matter if the referee's against us, we'll just score an extra goal. We'll
yeah.
just,
I
we'll do
suspect.
what we have to do.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect Ange is of that mindset. I'll come on to that in a minute in his post-match comments, and maybe we can sort of pick the bones and see the sort of correlation of what you're just saying there, actually.
Mm.
But I mean, I just want to get your take on this. Were you impressed with the way that, considering we're down to 10 men, we sort of managed out the game?
Yeah, totally. I forgot we were down to 10 men. About 3 minutes after he'd been sent off, I'd forgotten we were down to 10. And it wasn't until Porro nearly scored. I think it was that chance. And the commentator said, "Oh, had they have got a third, that would really have been the icing on the cake, especially seeing as they're down to 10." And I
Mm,
thought, "Oh yeah, we are, aren't we?"
yeah, yeah.
Because I didn't actually see us play any differently than what we'd
No.
been playing for most of the second half.
In fact, we look more likely to score. I mean, okay, at the end there was that incredible save from Vicario,
Mm.
because they had to throw the kitchen sink at it, but then because they had to throw the kitchen sink at it, they left themselves wide open, and I felt that we had a couple of really good chances. I mean, Son had one that really should have buried.
He,
Um,
he
you
should
know,
have scored two
yeah.
yesterday at least. I think one at the start and one at the finish.
And I think Porro had one that load of players, their defenders threw themselves in the way, and he had a chance to score as well. So we had a chance to finish the game off. But yeah, I mean, let's just reflect on Vicario save at the end. He just sort of throws his body. Everyone thought that's over the line. All their players thought that was over the
Mm.
line, and it wasn't. It was
Yeah,
incredible
yeah,
reflex save
yeah,
that one.
yeah, yeah. It didn't get anywhere near the line in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
end. It actually showed it slowed down. The interesting thing is, is that happened when they bring on Chris Wood, and um, Hudson Odoi, um, and they have that more direct sort of, kindly, obviously Chris Wood's an ex-Burnley player, and that's how
Mm.
they used to use him. That sort of very old-fashioned English into the mixer sort of an approach.
Battering ram kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and actually, I looked at it and thought, to start with, I thought, well, that's probably why they're in the trouble that they're in, because the manager hasn't gone out from the start playing that game because they
Mm.
look more dangerous. But the flip side of that is, of course, had they have done that, we probably would have scored about 4 or 5
Mm.
because
Mm.
they did leave the back door wide open when they really went for it. They looked a lot more dangerous, but I think we looked. Actually, the shuffling, the tactical shuffling,
Mm.
he brought Skip and Hoiberg on, and Emerson on, and altered the shape a little bit more, without really losing a huge amount of the final third threat, because obviously
No.
Kulusevski and Porro were the main outlets at that point, and that maintained that pressure on them. I think
Yeah.
we look perfectly comfortable actually at that point.
Yeah, I think it's spot on. I think that, the fact that we looked calm and composed. I don't think, we didn't look flappy as we would have done in the past. And like you say, there was always an outlet, and I think that meant that we could alleviate some of that pressure on us by springing them, like we did on several occasions.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
yeah.
I mean, you look at the other thing as well is you look at the line, because obviously they started playing high balls diagonally into the box and from the corner, and they won a few corners towards the end as well. The line that we were playing maintained its discipline, and I always think that that is the sign of a team that are panicking in defence.
Mm.
That we retained our very, very strict, very hard offside line when the ball was coming in. Obviously, earlier on they'd had that goal disallowed where we'd had that height right on the edge of the penalty box, and of course the ball comes in and they're a good yard offside. 90% of the city of Nottingham is offside at that point. Um, and so and I thought we sort of we retained that discipline really well, and that's the thing that I look for. Think, if we're panicking, if it's getting a bit helter skelter and a bit backs to the wall, the line goes. There's always one that comes out of position that's playing everybody else on. There's always one person that's dallying. And of course, once you bring Hoiberg on the pitch, good as he is at some things, you start losing the ball in midfield a lot,
Mm.
which we did. One or two of their best chances came from him losing the fucking ball as usual.
Mm.
But everybody else maintained that position, and they seem to be maintaining their head and their focus. And I thought that was really, really encouraging, because although they were battering us, we did not go to pieces over it.
Yeah, I thought that was a hard fought win in the end, considering we're down to 10 men. But I remember messaging yesterday, and not everyone agreed, but I thought it was a thoroughly deserved win. Okay, it wasn't a classic game. We didn't dominate it at all times, but considering you know where we find ourselves, not only with injuries, a really hostile crowd, and the fact that for about 30 minutes we were down to 10 men, sorry. I thought it was a well-deserved hard-fought win, and again, we find ourselves now with some absences going forward for the next game, and of course, then we've got the AFCON and Asia Cup, which are going to have an impact on us over January. But I noticed when Andrew was talking about it in the press conference, because they were asking about how how is he going to react to that, and he just says, "Look, we're not making excuses. We feel that we can cope. We are looking to the players and see how they react in these situations." And he was talking about it in terms of, not only do I find out a lot about my players, but it's also, once you come out the other side of all of this, it's character building and resilience building, and that's what he's in the process of doing at the moment. And you can see that, right? I mean, you think of other teams around us who, if they had have consistently lost players, through suspensions or through injury like we have, how would they have coped? How would Arsenal have coped without, let's say, Saliba and Odegaard and Jesus maybe? How do other teams cope with two, three of their best players out? I don't think they're going to cope. And something about the way that Ange is kind of communicating to them, you can tell is really kind of making them believe, because the players yet again are coming out onto Twitter and saying really hard win that, but Romero said, we really feel we're on the track to something here. That kind of sort of collegiate sort of feel where they're all in the same song sheet, and they're all trying to get that message out to us and just say basically, believe in us, we believe in everything that's going on here, is clear. I mean, we're and not making excuses like previous managers always did. They constantly were finding excuses and reasons why it couldn't be as good as it could be, because they didn't have this, they didn't have that, and this was going to happen, and moaning about the fixture schedule. He's not. I mean, Ange just recently said it's always like this at Christmas, and we just get on with it. And I like that. There's a lot to be said that then, how he talks is really important, and because then they kind of all subscribe to that, and I think it's refreshing. It's really honest and straightforward, and there's no other silly agendas at play here, and I think a lot of people, including of course our players and the fans, appreciate that straight talking.
Yeah. I mean, very much so. I think one of the things that I picked up on in his post-match comments yesterday as well was that they were sort of saying, yeah, obviously we're going to lose Destiny, and we losing Basuma for extended periods of time, and we've got injuries going forward still to key players and that, and how does that affect the way that you plan and the way that you're working? And he said, well, we know that we're just going to have a season like this.
Yeah.
We know that this is the year that we're going to have, that we're always going to be fighting for momentum in terms of fitness and availability. And that we are planning for that, and I thought that was really interesting, because like you say, other managers would go, oh, what can I do when I'm missing my number 10, or I'm missing my number 8, or what can I do when AFCON comes up and takes away my players, and the Asia Cup's going to take away my captain. And he's just gone, well, we knew about this. This is just how it's going to be. And I think, that kind of is interesting for them to sort of come out and say that, because it not only does it kind of manage the expectation of everybody, he's not making out that he lives in a perfect world. He's also not making an excuse out of it. And more importantly, it signals to the players that they are in a process wherein the struggle is not time limited. You're going to have to be resilient this year. You have got to keep turning up. You have got to keep trying. It's not going to be plain sailing. I'm not coming into this club telling you, don't worry, from here on in, it's all easy. And I think that's really good. I think that's a really positive way of approaching it, because not only is it pragmatic and accurate, but it sends the message that we don't expect it to be given to us on a plate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is a huge change of mentality. I mean, let's ignore the previous managers and what they would have done, but Ange has not played the Harry Kane card at all, has he? I lost him at the beginning of the season. What do you expect? He's not done that one, and we're talking of probably one of the greatest players in our history we lost. And yet at the moment we find ourselves 4 points off the top.
Yeah. And I mean, I've said this for a long time though, haven't I? I mean, I think I've shied away from saying it on the podcast before we sold him, because obviously it would have been like, standing up in the 1700s and telling everybody you were a Catholic. But I always thought we were too reliant on him. That that Harry Kane became, and I know Pep Guardiola did the whole Harry Kane team thing, and we always used to balk at the fact that we were a one-man side, but we did used to lean on him in a way that that was perhaps unhealthy from a club perspective. You're gonna when you have one of the greatest players the league's ever seen. But I mean, even Son said it in a post-match interview. I think it was after the Newcastle game that we would have relied on Harry to get us out of these sticky situations in the past, and now we have
Mm,
to do it as a collective.
mm,
I think that's a really healthy attitude towards it. I think the club comes out stronger from not having him as a club as a whole. The team
mm,
is weaker because, obviously you don't have Kane's ability to finish those opportunities. We see the main difference in between Kane and Richarlison is how they work that space when a ball comes into in and around the penalty spot on the ground. They work that space in very, very different ways. Richarlison likes to run onto it. Kane obviously like to preferred almost to get the ball with his back to goal and make his own room.
mm, mm.
um, and so it's a very different approach, but I think that kind of admission is implicit that yeah, we can be stronger without Harry Kane, and actually standing there and saying, oh, wouldn't it have been nice if I still had this striker, would be counterproductive for Ange, because you can't buy another player like Harry Kane, let alone buy
No.
Harry Kane again.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. And this might sound slightly contradictory, but it's not. It's the idea, I think that and clearly it wasn't just a one-man band. Clearly we would be a better team with Harry Kane in it. But what it's done is it's forced us to look at the collective more and concentrate on building that and sharing that responsibility out more. Whereas, like you say, we did lean on Kane quite a lot. I mean, he was you can't say he wasn't a great team player. He was, but so much fell to him to get us out
Mm.
of situations. Now there isn't that. The collective does become much more important, and I think that's then sending them on that journey more. And I think it enables then Ange to communicate that message more about how just be ready. You might not be playing at the moment, but be ready, because at some point we're going to need you. And I
Mm.
think that is pervasive in the team at the moment. Even for all I've never been Højbjerg's biggest fan. He's come on and done a job, but even when he comes on, he does a job. I mean, okay,
Mm.
sometimes he mucks up, but you can see that he will do his best. And I
Yeah.
think at the moment, that's all you can ask, is that whoever comes on, they're fully committed to what they've been asked to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we should do before we go away from last night's game completely is just give a bit of a mention to some of the other players. We've spoken about
Mm,
Kulusevski. And I do think Højbjerg, although I've already said, again, he comes on and loses the ball in the centre of the field.
yeah.
When Basuma gets to second and Højbjerg comes on, there is a reassurance in that.
Mm.
If that player is going to come and do a solid job of work in the middle of that
Well, you
field.
know what he brings, right? I mean,
Yeah,
he's not the world's most creative player, but you know what he brings, and Ange's not bringing him out on out of sympathy or anything. He can do a job.
yeah, he can, and he does do that job, well.
Mm,
It's not a very fashionable job, and like you say, it's not a silky job.
mm,
But you can't have them silky jobs being done if you don't have players like Højbjerg, or
mm,
obviously,
mm.
it's Sarr that he's lost his place to, who does that kind of physical kind of domination in the middle of the park job a lot better than Højbjerg. But when Basuma goes off, you could do a lot worse than bringing a player like Højbjerg on, because he does shore that side up and he does offer stability in the middle of the park when you're a man down. And I think he did do well last night. And it
Mm.
was a difficult atmosphere to come into, and
Yeah.
and he came into a side that was not properly under the cosh, because Forest aren't that good, but certainly a side that was under pressure, and of course now a man down as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think we should give him a bit of a nod for the job that he did when he came on.
Totally. And talking about giving props to people, as some people say, of course, the usual suspects. I think Vicario had another brilliant game. Porro again, Kulusevski, fantastic. Romero, no cards. I thought
Oh,
he
yeah.
really controls the game well. He reads it well and passes out well. But I've got to make a special mention to someone who's not so glamorous as any of those. I thought Ben Davis had one of his best games in years, maybe yesterday. I thought he was really solid and read the game so well, and it's taken him a little bit of time to adapt to that to that role because that's not a familiar role for me. He's not a centre back, um, and yet he's come in there and and I think he's really learnt it well. And I thought he was superb yesterday. He read the game so well. Really important to to the result yesterday, I thought, and he must be one of those players I think that other players look to in terms of just being that kind of player's player, really consistent, the one that you just know is quiet but always comes in and is always ready and does a job to the best of his ability without any kind of without any moaning or whatever it is. He just gets in and does the job and seems to be an intelligent player who is learning. I mean, when everyone's back, of course, he's not going to be in the team, but to have a player like that, I think it's really important in terms of the squad, to have someone like that. I mean, he could easily be a first team player for a number of other teams in the league, but you just know what you're going to get when you bring Ben Davies on, and it's not spectacular, it's not electric pace, but it's just professionalism. And yesterday, I thought, yeah, as I say, he had one of his best games in a long, long time.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything, and right at the very end there, it's the word that I always think when you refer to him is professionalism. I mean, Ben Davies has been the model professional at the club throughout it all, throughout
Mm.
his nearly 10 years at the club now. And he's been incredibly patient for huge amounts of time. To start with, he was against Danny Rose, who was a preferred player in his position. And then of course other players came in and got ahead of him because they were quicker, and they came in and went out and came in and went out. He had a couple of nasty knocks, I think, during Pochettino's era. Spent a bit of time out on the sideline. He came back. Again, he's always been reliable. You've been able to call from him from the bench and know that he's going to put in a performance, that he'll perform to the best of his abilities. And I think he's a bit like a James Milner kind of character in the squad,
Mm,
isn't he?
mm,
All
mm.
those years Milner spent at the clubs where he's been that sort of slightly more unfashionable, slightly, I mean, there's the joke about the boring James Milner is the sort of meme that goes around, but I think that's kind of testament to the professionalism of the,
Teams
you know.
Yeah,
Uh,
teams need those sort of players. I mean, it sounds like damning with faint praise when we say these sort of things, but it's really not. It's just that player you can always count on, that when
yeah,
you need them, they're there.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the thing, uh, we've had several thousand flash in the pan players that have come and gone over the years, and they've lit everything up for 5 minutes, and then they've either left or got injured or what have you.
Mm.
And how many of them have had the longevity and the reliability of Ben Davis? And I mean,
Yeah.
we talk a lot about whether or not Hugo Lloris will get a testimonial at Spurs. I think Ben Davis is a player who very much deserves one.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and let's hope that he stays just that little bit longer and is involved. I can't see how he won't be because
Mm,
he has
mm.
been so impressive.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, mate. Right, well, let's round it up with the preview then of the Everton game at home that we got coming up on Saturday week. Um, so we've got some suspensions. Who do you think comes in for Doggy and for Bissouma?
I think he's going to start Royale, isn't he? I think he's got to.
Yeah, it's obvious choice,
Um,
isn't it? Really.
it is really, and I mean, he's been, although he does look a little bit rusty at times, he's another player that I think he's misunderstood by a lot of folks, isn't he, Royale? I
Mm.
think he must do a lot better
It's
than
another one
actually.
that comes on with a great attitude.
Yeah, and he's got a bit of stick over time,
Mm.
and sometimes he's deserved it, and sometimes he hasn't, and sometimes I think he takes himself a bit too seriously, and sometimes you wonder whether or not he's not taking himself seriously at all, and that's
Mm.
why,
Mm. Mm.
and other people aren't getting the joke. But I do think that, I don't have a huge concern. He's not going to be as flair. He's not going to be as forward and creative as Udogie is, but I don't think it leaves a gaping hole in that position.
No, 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 no. I think that. And then what about replacing Basuma? Who would you have there?
I mean, with the Everton game in mind, I think probably it's Højbjerg, isn't it, that
Mm.
starts that game, because it's going to be another physical contest.
That's the only
Uh,
thing that worries me. I mean, we've just given him a bit of kudos, but starting him, he seems to have this habit of making us start slower. And because of the way he passes, and I think he is that player that comes on for the last 15, 20 minutes when you've really got to sort of see out a game. Having him on from the beginning, I think could be an issue. But who do you given everything, who do you play if you weren't going to play
I
him?
mean, this is the thing. He's got the minutes. He knows the system better
Yeah, yeah.
than most, I
It's
suppose.
got to be
Or
over Skip. I wouldn't play Skip.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't think Skip offers you anything that Højbjerg doesn't offer you at the
No.
moment. I think he
Mm,
might have done when he first broke in.
mm,
I think he was a better player under Conte than he is.
yeah, yeah.
He got minutes for sure. But yeah, I mean, I think he's got to start Højbjerg. And I think when you look at the opposition that's coming up next, it's Everton, right?
Mm,
They're a side that are going to put a lot of muscle. It's a Sean Dyche side, so
mm.
they're not going to
They're in
play
good
through.
form.
They're in very good form. They're going to put a lot of muscle through the middle of that pitch.
Yeah.
And although Højbjerg is vulnerable to being turned over when he's in possession in the centre of the pitch, maybe having Sarr next to him is going to be mitigation for that, because obviously I think in the past those two have been interchangeable. So I think, maybe in the
Mm.
game we're probably going to be looking at picking goals from set pieces against Everton, aren't we? We're going to be looking at targeting, balls from corners and things like that in order to create scoring opportunities rather than playing the ball on the ground through the middle of the field.
What about going left field and putting Dyer in there? He used
No,
to
don't,
play that for Pochettino.
don't be fucking stupid.
Okay, I shut up. Right, yeah. Okay.
Don't
Yeah.
do that.
I'll tell myself to shut up as well now. Yeah. Okay. So prediction.
It does go to show, though, doesn't it, how limited our options are at the
Yeah.
moment?
Yeah. Yeah. Right,
Mm.
mate. Now your colours to the mast. What's your score prediction for this game?
I think we beat them 2-1. I think
Hmm.
it's going to be another really, really difficult physical battle.
Yeah.
Um, I think, did I see that Sean Dyche was in the stands watching this one
Yes, he
last
was. Yeah. Yeah.
night?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's going to be physical. I think it's going to be tough. I think we score at least one of our goals from a set piece. I wouldn't be at all surprised if it's a Romero header from a corner or a free kick
Yeah.
again, because those plays are obviously something we've targeted. They look very good going forward. I mean, they're very, very, very defensively well organised. I think they've conceded the fewest goals in the last 5 or 6 games in the league or
Oh,
something like
really?
that.
Hmm.
Yeah. And they don't drop a lot of points from winning positions. So I mean, obviously they won't be if they're not conceding goals. I think they're more dangerous going forward. Now that they've got Calvert-Lewin back and sort of Decore's playing more games for them, they look a more they carry more of a threat really than they have done for quite some time. That said, I'm not massively convinced that they will cause us huge problems in open play. I
Hmm.
think it will be a game of set pieces, you
Yeah.
know.
I think it'll
Um,
be a war of attrition between the two sides. I think they're I think Sean Dyche looking at that yesterday would have thought, oh, okay, right, okay, I could see how you disrupt Spurs here. You just basically rough them up, kick them up.
but this is the thing. I mean, this was obviously something we were talking about last night. I'm not convinced it's working as a strategy because everybody's trying it and we've
Yeah,
worked
yeah.
out to win anyway.
Well, we're starting to work out. I think we're getting a bit frustrated at times, but we're starting to kind of come to terms with it more because I think we realise, that this is the way that a lot of lower league sides see the way past Spurs is just basically maybe they don't like it up them, Spurs soft underbelly kind of thing.
Everett
But
has
it's not
been
working as well as people think.
No, Everett has been thus. This is the
Mm,
thing. And I think what will happen is we'll go through 2 or 3 more games of this being, de rigueur, shall
mm,
we say. I fully expect Sean Dyche to take this approach because it's kind of his de facto approach to football
mm.
management anyway. I mean, that's not saying he's one-dimensional, but he uses the tools that he's got.
Yeah,
And at Everton, they don't have a massive amount of flair available to them at the minute. Um, so I think, that's what he's going to do. But I think what happens is that teams that's how you beat Tottenham, and actually now we've realised that's what teams are coming, and we're working out how to get round it anyway. We're standing up and we're being harder and we're kicking back and we're and
Mm,
we're doing a bit more, and we're picking up the points. Both Newcastle and Forest tried it and failed, and I
mm,
and I and I expect Everton to try it and fail,
mm,
and then I expect these teams to start coming with that really ultra low block instead.
mm, mm,
Because that's what happens when they go, well, you can't kick them off the pitch anymore, and if you try and play them off the pitch, they'll rip you a new arsehole.
mm.
All we're going to do is we're going to sit deep and we're going to try and hit them on the break. And I think
Yeah.
that'll be our New Year's resolution to try and break that approach down. I think we're towards the end of that because I think the squad and Ange have worked out. Okay, well, if that's what folks are going to do, this is how we beat it.
Mm, mm. I think personally it's going to be a really tough game that we'll win 1-0, I think. We normally, we so far we've scored in every single game. Hopefully, touch wood, that's going to continue. But I don't see this one being a high scoring game. I think it's gonna be stop start. I think they're going to try and disrupt the game as much as possible. I think unfortunately Højbjerg will slow it down a bit. So I think it's going to be a bit of a frustrating one, but I can see it being, us just about sneaking it by the odd goal. But I'm going to go 1-0.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't, I think I think they will score. That's the thing. I
Yeah.
think they will score. I can't see them keeping a clean sheet against them because I think they're more of a threat. Forest came very close to scoring last night, and they can't fucking buy a win at the moment.
Mm, mm,
Uh, so I can't see us keeping a clean sheet, but I think you're right. I think we beat them by a single goal. I do think we beat them.
mm.
And what I would quite like us to do is kidnap Dominic Calvert-Lewin before they leave, because I think I'd quite like to see him in our squad. I think he'd add something really quite nice to it, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, I don't know. The other thing I'm going to say this just as a total sort of non sequitur, really, but only because he's one of their players now. I said this on the WhatsApp the other night, and I'm just going to raise it as a thing. I keep having this kind of train of thought when I'm sort of bored at work doing menial tasks. What on earth do you think Ange Postecoglou would do with Dele Alli?
Oh, yeah. I think there's still a player there, He's still only 27.
Yeah,
And I think if anyone could get a tune at him again, it would be him.
wouldn't it? Wouldn't
Mm,
it? Yeah, that's all I keep thinking. Because I mean, obviously he's been carrying an injury, which is why he's not playing
mm,
at the moment. But I think he's training again now. He's had treatment for addiction. He's had treatment for psychological issues. He's a very, very troubled person. He's had a really
mm,
difficult life in some respects. And you think of all of the things that he must have been carrying around in his head on his own at that time that he was with us. Quite a burden to have on a set of young shoulders.
mm,
But you think, if there's a way of coming out the best of it, and actually, as much as I do quite like Sean Dyche, I think he's a very personable man. I think
mm. He's
underrated as
treated
a man.
Ali well, hasn't he, as well?
Yeah, and I think he's very respectful for what Ali's going through, and I think he talks well about it, and he's not as kind of no nonsensey as people make him out to be, Paul Dyche. I think he's a much more sort of intellectual
Mm,
person, So I'm not kind of belittling what Everton are doing for Ali, but it was something that started. I saw the other week that Spurs are trying to renegotiate. I think in light of all this financial fair play stuff, Spurs are offering Everton a way to restructure the way that they are liable to make payments to us when he makes certain number of appearances, and he's getting close to that now.
mm, mm.
And so I think Spurs have offered him a slightly different deal to restructure it, and Everton have turned it down. And I thought, oh, wouldn't it be nice if they said, right, fuck it, the whole deal's off, we'll have him back, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Ah,
Um,
yeah, that would be
it,
a lovely little redemption arc, wouldn't it? Because he actually has a lot about his game when he was in his pomp that would be just perfect for this team.
wouldn't it? Wouldn't it?
Mm,
And if you think about having a player that deputizes into that Madison role, if you want, you
mm,
need to have two players. Obviously, Kulusevski can play there, and Bentancur can play there, but both of their most likely other positions are in slightly deeper or slightly
mm,
wider
mm,
roles, retrospectively, um, or respectively, should I say? That that actually, having a player like him in the squad, where you're able to sort of switch up that kind of that sort of technical ability and against being able to ghost in and out of space and work space in for forward players. I think he'd thrive in that system.
Yeah.
Anyway, probably
Oh, well.
there you go.
Nice to dream.
Yeah.
Anywho, right, let's wrap it up, mate. And yeah. Oh, actually, I think it'll be Richie that scores as well.
Yeah, I think, you think you Richie. I think I've got Romero from a corner and possibly Richie getting the winner as well. I meant to say, 3-2. Let's hope it's coming for him.
Yeah. Andrew's saying he looks much better in training. He says, and you can tell a lot from that. He said it's just the way he's moving and playing and his confidence in training. He said it's nothing he's seen from him at all since he took over. So hopefully.
Yeah. Hopefully, wouldn't that be marvellous? Because we're going to need him in January when we lose Son.
Yes, we are. Yeah. Okay, well, that's another upbeat pod, another win under the belt. On to the next one.
On to the next one. And all our business is concluded for the weekend, which means we can watch both matches of the day without worrying about what we're going to see. The women have beat Woolwich at White Hart Lane at lunchtime today, 1-0. So that's another good one.
Yeah.
It's good in the world of Spurs.
Cool. Right. And on that note, come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.
There's no place on earth I wouldn't want to be than right here, in this minute of trying to bring success to one of the biggest football clubs in the world. The basic underlying principles that I want my team to play football that scares the life out of every opposition, mate. That's kind of the end game.